But you know what?
Episode 49, Demon Tarot by Ariana Osborne. Preface and reading. You're listening to UniquilibriuM, presented by Hakeem Alibokas Alexander on Spreaker, Social Podcasting, and Wisdom, Social Audio Inc., presented for World Reading Club in association with UniquilibriuM. On Spreaker, this is presented on the UniquilibriuM podcast and will be distributed throughout the podcasting networks. The Forbidden Wisdom of the Infernal Dictionary, the Demon Tarot, Ariana Osborne. Original illustrations by Louis Breton from Jacques Augustin Simon Colin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal. Demon Tarot.
It's nice to be here. That was a long day, but I
Preface.
put up with most of my sleeping.
When the demonologist Jacques Augustin Simon Colin de Plancy first published his Dictionnaire Infernal Dictionary, in France in 1818, the text reflected many of his free thought sensibilities. The dictionary was filled with entries about magic and the occult to educate and entertain readers, but it also warned against the dangers of making decisions based on superstitious beliefs and prejudices instead of logic and reason. Then, in the 1830s, Colin de Plancy converted to Catholicism, and he set about revising and expanding many of the entries in accordance with the beliefs of the Roman Catholic Church. The 6th edition of Dictionnaire, published in 1863, is a very different book from the original. In short, many of the demons listed in Dictionnaire became just a bit more demonic, with all of the negative connotations the lost A implies. So what she's saying here is because in the original word demon, they use it spelled D-A-E-M-O-N-S. And when she said the word demonic, it's spelled without the A, D-E-M-O-N-I-C.
All right. Thank you.
Just a little side note, something that I'd learned before, that one of the original names for God was demon, and that's just what it meant. And it's spelled with D-A-E-M-O-N.
I don't know what he's drinking, but I know it's coffee.
Regular.
The Demon Tarot preface continues. Ariana Osborne. Colin de Plancy also commissioned more than 500 engravings for this new edition of Dictionnaire. Some tiny illustrations of snakes, witches, and other creepy dingbats, some full-page depictions of occult rituals, and 69 of those pictures, most portraits of named demons, are signed with the initials LB for Louis Breton. While the text accompanying those illustrations may be frightening and condemning, Breton's pictures are beautiful, compelling, and filled with charming personality. These are not pictures of leering monsters. They are clearly inhuman, but their strangeness does not make them appear terrible. It's worth noting at this point that Breton's illustrations have been reprinted in many different grimoires and art collections in several different languages. Colin de Plancy's Dictionnaire, on the other hand, has been all but forgotten, except as the original printing of those images. In fact, when I got my hands on a copy of the book, I wasn't immediately concerned with translating the text to English. However, once I saw Breton's illustrations in their original glory, I had to find a way to share them with everyone. All the reprints of those images that I had ever seen were, as is so often the case with photocopies or reproductions from older texts, scuffed and scratched, or missing many of the original details. My copy of Dictionnaire had suffered some of the wear of age too, but those details were all still there, just waiting for a bit of digital spit and polish. I don't often have what you'd call spare time, but I decided it was worth making some time to try my hand at restoring Breton's illustration and thinking of a way to bring them back into print. I also made a discovery while pulling out those 69 signed illustrations. There is one image in the book in Breton's very singular style, under the entry for Diablo, devil, that he did not initial. But sure enough, the title page for the dictionary states that there are 70 images by Louis Breton, so that last one may be his. I soon realized that, with a bit of cohesive design, I could create a matched set of cards out of Breton's works. And I decided to use that unsigned image, which had so often been ignored in reprints, for the card backs. With a bit of work, I could release these lovely old pictures in a brand new way, as a tool for inspiration or cartomancy, or simply decoration. At that point, I revisited Colin de Plancy's original text, and it inspired me to compile my own set of accompanying entries for the deck I was creating. This book is the result. Expanded text entries for each of the 69 cards to educate and entertain. I've broken each entry into this book into 3 sections: annotation, inspiration, and divination. The annotation sections are my research on each subject. There you'll find a brief description of each demon's attributes, compiled not only from Dictionnaire, but also from a variety of other sources, all of which can be found at the end of the book if you're interested in further reading. These descriptions will give you a little bit of the history and mythology of each subject. Now, there's no way I could fit all of the available information into these pages. Many of the demons here have enough recorded stories to fill a book of their own, but it will be enough to get you started. The inspiration sections are my own interpretations and insights into the subject of each card. I hope that the images and annotations will inspire you to form your own interpretations too. The wonderful thing about beings of myth and legend is that most people won't ever meet any of them in the flesh. So, unless you're intending to forcibly summon any of the demons in this deck, you're free to imagine their intentions and motivations however you like, and apply those interpretations to your life experiences in ways that are personal and unique. By the way, I don't recommend forcibly summoning any demon. I know that I would be rather annoyed if someone dragged me with no warning into a room filled with incense. I mean, that's just rude. I'm not surprised that stories of summonings seldom end well for the summoner. The divination sections are the next best thing to dragging a demon into your living room to answer all of your questions. The cards are not a traditional tarot deck. There is not a lot of correlation with the major arcana, and there are no suits. Nevertheless, divination can be done with cards, dominoes, runes, dice, nursery rhymes, or flower petals, and it can be done with this deck too. I've always thought that cartomancy is more about allowing the focus on specific thoughts to guide the mind than it is about memorizing card meanings and reciting them back. So I've refined my thoughts and interpretations from the inspiration sections into focused meanings that you can use in your own spreads. Because the deck is not made up of traditional tarot cards, I've done some experimenting. What I've found is that this deck works best as a divination tool with either a traditional 1-card draw or a somewhat new 6-card spread. For a single card draw, ask a question, shuffle the deck, and pull out an answer. It may not immediately be apparent what that answer is, but thinking about the meaning of the card should lead you there most of the time. There are a few tricksters in the deck, so it's fair to decide one card isn't working for you and draw another. The 6-card spread is useful for longer and more complicated questions. How to deal with a particular problem or situation, for instance. Moving from top to bottom, lay down 5 cards face up, 1 card at the top, followed by a row of 3 cards, 1 directly below the first, and 1 on each side. 2, 3, and 4. And the 5th card centered below the row of 3 to form a cross, 5. Finally, lay the 6th and final card face down to the right of the entire spread. 1. The top card in this spread is the querent, the person who is looking for guidance. It may not immediately seem that way. It may be difficult to figure out what you could possibly have in common with some of these demons. But this is a deck that will sometimes make you work for your answers. If you draw a strong knight, and you feel more like a fainting damsel, it may well be that you're selling yourself too short. Remember, if you really don't like what you see, even once you see the sense of it, well, it's you, and you can change yourself. 2, 3, and 4, left to right. The second row is made up of the best defense, the heart of the situation at hand, and the best offense. You can think of defense as the thoughts and actions that will best guard you, and offense as the thoughts and actions that will best affect everyone around you. The center card, the heart of the matter, may be most surprising. Often, one problem will masquerade as something completely different. If you think you're asking about love, and the cards tell you that you've got a war on your hands, it may be time to reevaluate the situation. 5. The third row is where the situation is heading. If all looks good, just keep doing what you're doing. Sure. But if not, 6. The last hidden or that last hidden card might be difficult to turn over. The first card is the querent, but the last card is someone else, someone that you can ask to help you with this situation. And sometimes that, asking someone else for assistance can be the hardest thing to do. However, if that 5th card really didn't look very good, isn't having an ally worth thinking about? If you are ready to ask someone to give you a hand, turn over the 6th card and it will lead you to that person. Here's one final disclaimer before we begin. One man's God is another man's demon. In this book and deck, you will find many demons that have almost always been considered just demons. During the 16th century, the Dutch demonologist Johannes Weyer compiled a list of the ranking demons of hell, the Pseudomonarchia Daemonium, false monarchy of demons, as an appendix to his treatise De Prestigiis Daemonium et Incantationibus ac Veneficus, on the illusions of demons and on spells and poisons. Many of the spirits listed in the Pseudomonarchia would later appear in the somewhat better-known Ars Goetia of the Lesser Key of Solomon, and many are also listed here, as they were used by Colin de Plancy as proof that demons were not only real, but also evil. However, I'm shooting for fair and balanced reporting, if you will. This means that, yes, I'll tell you if a demon is rumored to be particularly murderous, but I won't be ascribing any evil intent to what appear to be otherwise good-natured folk. If you choose to believe that anything that's not human is terrible, that's up to you. But I have no such prejudices. Well, except against spiders. I just don't like spiders. They are terrible. Note from Hakim. First, I very much do like spiders and snakes. Second, what's interesting, she says here, if you choose to believe that anything that's not human is terrible, that's up to you. In the TV show Supernatural, that's what the brothers did. They assumed that anything that wasn't human was evil, and they tried to kill it. But I don't know if anyone's watched that, but if you remember in one episode about a shapeshifter that they were chasing, she ended up saying the line, "Even monsters can do good in this world." And it's because she, as a shapeshifter, was turning into the form of a deceased loved ones to come back and do therapy. She was a therapist who was helping people to have some closure for loved ones who died and didn't have a chance to speak to them or say goodbye. So, just a little note on that.
That's the way it goes.
Demon Tarot preface and reading, or card reading, by Ariana Osborne continues.
Thank you. I think I'll
However, in addition to some Christian and regional demons and a handful of witches, objects, and ideas, there are also some spirits here that are better known as ancient and current gods of other countries and cultures. Some of that is a product of the time, and some of that is down to Colin de Plancy's conversion. Any belief that was different was evil and to be feared. However, just as I don't find the demon Astaroth's portrait particularly displeasing to the eye, he is described by Colin de Plancy as having the face of an ugly angel, and I will argue that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I will also argue that interpretations of who is good or evil are in the inner eye of the believer, be they Prussian, Hindu, Inuit, or hellish. It is of some historic value to allow that Colin de Plancy and his contemporaries saw, for instance, the goddess he called Kali as fearsome and terrible. I won't revise history, but I will balance that entry in my book with other, more positive interpretations of Kali. In that case, and a few others, I have kept Colin de Plancy's spelling for the entry, as I think it helps to keep both his and my interpretations a step removed from anyone who would appreciate neither of us commenting on his or her beliefs. Of course, I am publishing a book and a deck of occult images and text. No matter how I spell demon, D-A-E-M-O-N, or Kali, C-A-L-I, or anything else, someone may feel insulted by parts of this resource. To cover all my bases, the sincerest disclaimer I can offer you came first from Robin Goodfellow, as quoted by William Shakespeare, in the closing line of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
He was incredibly patient. And
if we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle theme, no more yielding, but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend.
That's right.
That concludes the preface for Ariana Osborne's The Demon Tarot, The Forbidden Wisdom of the Infernal Dictionary.
But I've always thought it, and I think I did tell him.
You are listening to episode 49 on Spreaker, social podcasting. And being presented here live also on Wisdom. Demon Tarot by Ariana Osborne, preface and reading. And so now I'm going to do a card reading. I should actually amend this here if it gives me room. Say card reading on Wisdom.
And Lawrence, my first cousin, that's Uncle Howard's son.
Card reading.
That's who he looks like.
So now I'm going to do the, I'll do a single card draw. As she described in the book, and then I'll do the 6-card spread here.
All the way from
so I've already shuffled them, but I'll do it again here, because there are many people that will hear this.
All right, honey, it's time for us to go
home. So, especially on Spreaker, where I get anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 downloads every week. Then we're going to have this be a general one, the first card draw. And then there'll be something more specific, so that it goes that if whatever time you hear this, then it should be relevant to you. I'd like to just acknowledge whoever has bounced in the room. We're out now here on Wisdom. I see Yusuf Wasserman, Alejandro J. Trinado, Levi, Jack, the founder of Wisdom, Dayo Akinrenati, Marcy Ann, Michael J., Isu444, and Sierra Mustaqim. I'm shuffling these. I'm going to do a single card here in just a moment. and see what this says for the upcoming
that's what we
general reading.
Because we know we're not spring chickens, but
So here is the first card I'm going to pull. Just a moment.
and sometimes I have to tell you how
Alright, let's see.
everything has gone. It's just like God just
Alright.
pulled us in one
First
direction
card.
and held
Single
our,
card draw.
held our backs. It held the wind to our
Alright,
backs.
that's interesting.
Because everything that we have done
This is
so
it's funny
far
because this
since
is
he's been
actually this
has
card
been
is one of the
like
most
a
feared
charm.
demons
I
in
have
much
to tell
of
you about
Christian and
Osborne
Catholic lore,
courthouse,
and also it's the
how
name
we
of a black metal
found it,
band, which
went there,
if you don't know, black metal
and it was a great experience.
is
And the guy that
like a
runs
cousin
it,
of death metal,
I have to tell you, I'll let
of
you
which
explain
you know
about
I'm a
it.
singer of
The guy
various
there
different
was-
death metal projects.
he was like-
And there's a black metal band called Belfegor, and
yeah.
they sing about some pretty evil stuff.
And, you know,
But
I was
that's
kind
again
of
not
like
what this is
tongue-in-cheek
about.
joking when I said,
But let's just take a look
I
at what
said,
his
maybe my
interpretation
mother and
says
his mother
here.
got together
So there's
and said,
several different things. She's got annotation, inspiration, and divination. So Belfegor's under B. She has all of these in alphabetical order.
okay, well, listen.
All right. So I'm going to look at
I
the
knew-
card
I knew
first.
all along
And
that
at
this
the
was a wonderful thing.
the bottom
I
of the
mean,
card,
all
it's
people
so
had to
Belfegor
be,
spelled B-E-L-P-H-E-G-O-R. Tells Belfegor, also Baal Peor, is a lord of hell associated with the deadly sin of sloth. His worshippers, according to demonologists, give offerings to him while taking their daily
Yes,
rest
yes.
on the toilet.
that's
hilarious.
right.
All right.
And something else.
Let's
right.
look at his
Talking out of both
annotation.
sides of your mouth. You don't do that.
That's funny. You know, a little side note, a story again.
I
There
know.
is I have this
I know.
book by and it's called The Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox. He's a Christian inspirational author.
And then
And,
too, what all?
I remember the book is focused on the book of Matthew, and specifically
That's
the Sermon
right.
on the Mount in the
That's
book of
exactly
Matthew.
right.
And one main part of it that I really
know,
appreciate
and,
was
the
his
other thing
interpretation
is that,
of
hey,
the line that
young
says, "The
folks,
pure of heart
I'm
shall see God." I
I'm
may
a
talk
grown
about that
woman,
later,
so,
but the funny story about that and just pulling this card Belfegor is that my best friend
well,
Christine at the
don't
time,
worry, they're gonna be.
I
they're
was
gonna be in
actually reading the book
you know,
on the toilet, and she quipped and she said, "Ha ha ha, a sermon on the
right.
toilet." So anyway,
That's right.
as Belfegor says that according to demonologists, his worshippers gave offerings to him while taking their daily rest on the toilet. I think that's funny. All right,
right,
so
or you
the
turn
annotation
around
for
and go
Belfegor.
back from whence you
Belfegor
came.
was a god of the Moabites, first mentioned in the Bible as Baal, Peor, lord of the region surrounding the mountain of Peor. He was
That's
a
right.
regional sun
That's
god
right,
who eventually
exactly.
evolved
He
into
is
Lord of
totally
Hell, associated
exactly
with the
who
sin
he
of
said he
sloth.
was.
Demonologists
Said
claim
he
that his
was. He
worshippers
has
only spoke to
proven
Belfegor while they were on the toilet, and that, in addition to the
Okay,
more
honey,
common
I will
sacrifices of the
talk to
time,
you at a
he also
later
accepted
date.
excrement as an
Okay.
offering. He was said
Okay,
to
we
give
will
inspiration
try a
for
little bit.
inventions to those who
Okay.
worshipped him, but those schemes often led to ruin.
He can't wait to meet Krista.
Inspiration. Oddly enough, much of the worship of Belfegor has somehow remained in the lexicon of human nature.
Oh,
Imagine for a moment the often used scene of someone suddenly having a eureka moment while in the bathroom and afterward rushing off to put plans into motion. That is precisely the scene demonologists attributed to Belfegor's influence. However, as Belfegor is the Lord of Sloth, those ideas may often be get-rich-quick schemes or barely thought-through plans that end up costing more in the long run than a more solid plan with more work would.
That's what's wrong.
Inspiration does appear in the most unlikely of places, but inspiration alone means nothing without the willingness to put in work and get the job done. I think that is a good overall inspiration for a lot of people because let's get real, a lot of people do think that they can do a lot of stuff without putting in the hard work. And here's the final part of it, which is the divination, which is how usually you would interpret a single card pull. And this is the actual or the final point, if you don't take anything else away from the annotation or the inspiration, this short, brief sentence here
Well, you got
is
that
the
right. And
divination for this first card pull.
You had the perfect role model for keeping
Beware of
keep-
inspiration that seems too good to be true, and ideas that seem
well,
like
you know who
easy
told you
money
that one?
with little work required. Again,
That's it.
beware of inspiration that seems
Yeah,
too good to be
certainly
true, and
Okay.
ideas that seem like easy money
I'm going to talk
with
to
little
you
work
later.
required.
Okay.
I know that that's probably something that comes up for a lot of people,
Thank you, honey.
especially
Thank you.
when you're dealing with
Okay, and you and
life
Kate,
coaches, marketers,
you and Kate can
speakers,
talk,
and things like that.
and,
When you're reading books or
let
anything
her-
where you're attempting to
still,
work on
you know,
personal development or self-development, self-help or things like
She
that,
is
different
shy.
kinds of
She's a
inspiration.
little shy.
There are definitely a lot of so-called snake oil salesmen
and that's exactly
and
what she's
different
gonna
things like
do.
that. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the 6-card spread as laid out in the book. And the first 5 cards are the main part of it.
Exactly.
And
right
then,
in front of you.
so remember the top card is going to be the querent, so the person asking the question or looking for guidance. And then you have the best defense, the heart of the situation at hand, and the best
That's
offense.
exactly right.
And then
Okay,
number 5 would be where the situation
Got
is
that
heading.
right. Got
And
that.
then the last
And
hidden
you just
card
have to
is the
make
one
sure
where it
that
might be asking for
keep
help
that
with
in
someone
mind
else.
and act
So
accordingly.
if while you're listening to this you have
Yes.
some kind of issue
Now,
or something that you want
That
spoken to,
respect and trust
and you're not
are two
squeamish about the fact that this is called the Demon Tarot, you can send forth, even you can even send a chat if you're listening live, or just think about it, or even write it down for yourself what you want to see what this says. And again, this could be for inspiration or simply just for your entertainment.
That's right.
Interestingly enough, one of the things that I find really powerful about this deck is that it resembles very much the Viking runes that I use. I have a book that I've been using for 20 years, and runes that I have from the Book of Runes by Ralph H. Bloom. And it has a similar spread when you do 5 runes. And the last one is always where the situation is heading and whatnot. I'm actually going to be doing another reading after this from the Black Tarot, and then I'll be doing some Runeable with the Book of Runes by Ralph H. Bloom. So hopefully I'll get to that in quick succession right after this. It's 2:12 in the afternoon Eastern Daylight Time, where I am here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So I want to get that done so I can go get some driving in before I have to hit my post opening doors for people a little bit later. So here we go. This is going to be the 6 card right here. I'm putting them face up first, and then I will put that last card facing down. So remember, it could just be for your entertainment. You could just be listening to this to get a good laugh or something like that. But let's see how we're going to do this, okay? So I've got them shuffled. I'll do one more little shuffle here. I know what my situation that I'm thinking about. And this probably is going to be the most influential part here, but you never know. If people are thinking about, or anything else, some of you may even be praying for my soul, because you think that I'm going to be faced with eternal damnation for playing with Demon Tarot cards. And that might even have some influence on things here. So let's see what comes of this when I put this spread out here. One more little spanning. And then, alright, here we go. There's 1, and then 3, 4. I have to move my devices here, see if I can get some more space.
Right.
So I've got 1,
The other one
2,
can
3, 4.
communicate.
Now I have 5, and I'm putting 6 to the top. All right. facing down. So now here's what's interesting about that. If you go on YouTube, I did I created a song called
You're not going to go over to
Mathematical Ontology, and it actually features the card that came out as the 5th card here, which is where the situation is heading. And from what I know about it, it's very relevant to a lot of people and could serve as an inspiration once you hear it. So let's start with the first card, which is the querent, which would be the person who's looking for guidance. That could be you. It could be a question that was posed to you by someone else. Or again, this could just be simply for your entertainment and just to kind of hear what he says. So the first one is Melchom. This is the querent. So Melchom spelled Melchom. Alright, let's see what Melchom has to say here. So his card, before I get to it in the book, says Melchom is one of the tilted members of the infernal monarchy. Oh, so it says one of the tilted members of the infernal monarchy. Instead, he holds a civic position, that of paymaster to the servants of hell. He counts the gold and holds the purse. Alright, well, let's see what this says. Now, remember, the last thing I'm going to read is actually what you can take as the final idea of what this reading presents. So Melchom, Melchom, because there's an annotation, inspiration, and then divination. Right? So this is the querent, person asking the question. Melchom. Annotation. Melchom is occasionally another name given to the demon Moloch. See page 95. But in Colin de Plancy's dictionary, Melchom is a separate entity. No description of his physical description is given. That's in the book, that double placing description. And he does not carry a royal title. But Melchom arguably has one of the more important positions in hell, that of the head of payroll. He is known as he who carries the purse in hell, and although there are certainly other demons who command direct subordinates, Melchom's position more than likely gains him a considerable amount of respect. After all, those who do not give him his due are likely to find their bank accounts a bit low at the end of the month. Inspiration. It may be an odd thing to consider hell having paychecks, but if you think about it, there are probably quite a few civil servants working the files and admissions to the place. Of course, some of those positions may well be carefully chosen punishments, but given the alleged size of the place, there must certainly be paid staff as well. Imagine the chaos without an organized budget, and Melchom becomes a very important member of the infernal hierarchy. And here's the final divination. This is for all of you that may have been listening, and I think this is interesting, following on the heels of what the first card pull said. So this is actually, I think, turning out to be a very good general reading for anyone. Because remember, the first card was Belfegor, and it talked about not being sucked into get-rich-quick schemes and trying to get money without doing hard work. So here's the divination for Melchom, for the querent, or the person asking the question. It's very simple. It says, focus on budgeting and frugality. Focus on budgeting and frugality. That's the divination here for the first card from Melchom, spelled Melchom. And I think that for many people, that is very relevant in their lives. Focus on budgeting and frugality. Okay, so that was the first one for the querent. Now, second card, reading from left to right, is made of the best defense, right? So, the best defense, remember, could be thought of as, let's see, just want to make sure that I give a good, this book, the best defense, let's see, thought of as the actions that will best guard you. Okay, so we're considering that you have to focus on budgeting and frugality. So the thoughts and actions that will best guard you, and that is presented by Berit or Berit. And on the card itself, the description of Berit is Berit, also Baal Berit, Lord of the Covenant, is a Duke of Hell with 26 military units under his command. Demonographers describe him as a soldier riding a red steed. And from the book, Berit. Annotation. Berit, also Baal Berit, Lord of the Covenant, is listed by Weyer as a Duke of Hell in command of 26 legions. Colin de Plancy and other demonologists describe his appearance as very human, as a soldier riding a red steed and wearing the crown of his station. However, the idols of the Baal Berit of biblical literature had many forms, including flies, which were perhaps actually idols to another Baal, see Beelzebub. Berit is one of the few demons whose weakness is specifically recorded by most demonologists. Most sources agree that in order to command Berit, the summoner must have a certain magical ring. Lord of the Rings. Inspiration. In addition to the fairly common demonic skills of telling the past, present, and future, Berit is said to have been able to help alchemists turn anything into gold. He was also said to enjoy inciting war and murder. There is perhaps some correlation there, for gold is very often the motive behind war, murder, and other dark deeds. I also find it fascinating, once again, that these first two cards have to do with money. Actually, the first one did, when I did the single card pull in the beginning, and then the second one said to focus on budgeting and frugality. And when I say second, I mean the second that I pulled. Because remember, I did a single card pull, and it was Belfegor who was warning against trying to get money without doing hard work. And then now I'm doing the 6-card pull, and the first card here from Malcolm said to focus on budgeting and frugality. And now here we go with Berit talking about alchemy turning lead into gold. And so now let's look at the divination. Remember, this is the one key point that you can focus on, which is what the card pull is really for. I could very well do the 6-card pull without reading the annotations or inspiration if I wanted to do something more quickly, and then just read these divinations. But here goes the divination for the defense. Remember, this is defense, and defense are the thoughts and actions that best guard you. And this is quite fascinating how this has turned out. Divination. Focus on material gain, but beware of greed that can turn to dangerous motivations. This is really incredible how this happens. I mean, this is what is known as synchronicity. And as I've heard one wisdomer repeat over and over again, that synchronicity is the new normal, right? But I also, as many of you know, have reported on wisdom and various other places of many of the synchronicities that happened in my life, specifically some really amazing stories that happened with the numbers 111, me also working at a club called Central 111, and also the numbers 222, which happened over and over again with some pretty incredible things. And as I'm saying that, we now have 11 people who have either come to listen or bounced through the room. And the 11 in the Angel Guides book is also says it's the angels basically telling you to take notice, because when 11 pops up, it is, as it says here in the book, awakening. You're being called to attention. Your angels want to send you signs, but first they need to make sure you'll be paying attention. This number asks you to notice the world around you so you don't miss the important messages coming your way. Right? That's a thing there, everybody. Pay attention so you don't miss the important messages coming your way. Ask your angels for confirmation after you see this number. Repetition is their way of getting your attention. Okay, and I think this is also very relevant because we've had in the first 2 cards here that I've pulled or about money, and the one before that also referred to money, about not letting yourself get pulled into get-rich-quick schemes. And this is repetition here at its finest. Repetition, repetition, repetition. With these first 2 cards in the 6-card draw, and the one that I drew as a single card draw as the overall tone for what this reading is going to be about. Let's go to the 3rd card here, which, as Ariana Osborne describes, is the heart of the situation, right? And the heart of the situation, let's see, what is it here? The center card, the heart of the matter, may be the most surprising. Often one problem will masquerade as something completely different. If you think you're asking about love and the cards tell you that you've got a war in your hands, it may be time to reevaluate the situation. So the heart of the situation is represented by Nibus, or Nibas, which is spelled N-Y-B-B-A-S. And on his card it says, Nibus is perhaps the fallen Babylonian god of wisdom, who was once called Nabu. He does not hold a position of respect in hell, although he is in charge of visions and dreams. Alright, let's take a look at what this says here in the annotations, inspiration, and divination for Nibus. Annotation. So this is an expansion of what's on the card, right? Nibus is a demon who holds a minor position in hell, according to Colin de Plancy, and his area of expertise is the management of dreams and visions. His peers considered him to be a bit of a fool, but there is some possibility that Nibus is, in fact, another name for the Babylonian god Nabu. Nabu was an ancient god of wisdom and writing, with much in common with the Greek god Hermes and the later Roman god Mercury. Although Nibus is considered to be a bit of a charlatan in hell, there is no question that the stewardship of dreams is something he holds in common with the Oneiropompus, who carry dreams and visions from the gods to humankind. Inspiration. By the way, Oneiro is the word that means dreams. I call myself an Oneironaut, which is like an astronaut who explores dreams, because I'm a lucid dreamer. When I went to school for clinical hypnosis at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute in Tarzana, California, which, if anybody needs to know their accolades, they're the first nationally accredited college of hypnosis, and they're also recognized by the Department of Education, the United States Department of Education, and are accredited to be able to give continuing education credits to psychologists, MS, Masters of Clinical, the Marriage and Family Therapists, MFTs, physicians, doctors, psychiatrists, so on and so forth. Okay, and finally, we're going to look at, and one of the things that we learned is there's different parts of dreams. There's hypnagogic, which is when you're going to sleep. Those are the dreams that you have as you're falling asleep. And then there's hypnopompic, the dreams that you have as you're waking up. And so it says, there is no question that the stewardship of dreams is something he holds in common with the Oneiropompus, who carry dreams and visions from the gods to humankind. So hypnopompic is as you're waking up, carrying the dreams from the gods, right, in your sleep, is where you're able to contact that through your subconscious mind into humankind, to when you wake up to your conscious mind. All right, inspiration for Nibus. Inspiration. It is quite possible that, as the conductor of dreams and visions in hell, Nibus is not taken seriously for the same reason that we humans sometimes scoff at daydreamers, or those people who always seem to be off in their visions of the future. However, there is no questioning that we sometimes also speak of dreams with respect. People who have a dream of great things can inspire many, as can those leaders with vision. There is a fine line, it seems, between dreamers that are considered fools and those that are considered visionaries. And finally, remember the the important takeaway, if there is any at all for you, if it's more than just entertainment for you, the divination says here, focus for dreams, both inspiring visions and relaxing daydreams, and knowing the difference between the two. So focus for dreams, both inspiring visions and relaxing daydreams, and knowing the difference between the two. Knowing the difference between the two. Heart of the matter. So maybe many of you, and even me, may have been thinking of something about money, which is why it repeated itself 3 times. But saying the heart of the situation might be for us to have some discernment. It reminds me of that serenity prayer from what you hear in Alcoholics Anonymous that says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So again, the divination for Nibbus is focus for dreams, both inspiring visions and relaxing daydreams, and knowing the difference between the two. All right. Next is the 4th card, which is described as to be the best offense, and the offense is, let's see here. Oh yeah, so thoughts and actions that will best affect everyone around you. That is what the best offense is, whereas the best defense was the thoughts and actions that will best guard you, which, as we saw, was frugality and things like that. So here's the best offense, and it's Mycale, or Mycale. It's spelled Mycale. Mycale. I'll pronounce it Mycale. I like that pronunciation of it, Mycale. And Mycale, here says on the card, Mycale was a witch of Thessaly, a region of ancient Greece known for its magic. She is shown here performing one of the most notable magical rituals of witchcraft, drawing down the moon. Oh, and today being the full moon tonight on Cinco de Mayo, maybe keep that in mind. As we read this card here, it might be more especially powerful as your offense, the thoughts and actions that will affect everyone around you. So let's look at Mycale, as I'm pronouncing it here. Mycale, her annotation says, Mycale was not a demon at all, but a sorceress mentioned very briefly, only 2 lines, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, as the Lapith mother of the Proteus and Orion. Apart from listing her sons, the only other note Ovid gives on Mycale is that she once pulled the moon down from the sky. Inspiration. To understand why such a tiny footnote in history is worth mentioning in a book of demons, we need to look at where Mycale's home would have been located. As a Lapith, she and her sons would have come from Thessaly in ancient Greece. Many centuries later, legends of the women of Thessaly and their strange power were still being told, and scholars collected some into volumes. One ritual of the Thessalian women in particular, that of drawing down the moon, gained some popularity in poetry and folklore of the 1800s, and it is from that later resurgence that the modern-day Wicca ritual was created. Although the current ritual does not literally pull the moon out of the sky, it is still a relatively important and well-known aspect of Wicca, and it is a ritual that very likely would not exist in any form anymore if it were not for a few tiny written references from ancient history, including 2 short lines about Mycale, one of the few Thessalian sorceresses mentioned by name. Okay. Just this drawing down of the moon reminds me of the movie that came out, I think it was last year, 2022, starring Halle Berry, called, was it called Falling Moon, right? Something like that. And then where they found out that there was a hollow moon, which reminded me of a book that I read called Our Mysterious Spaceship Moon, in which they described how the moon was actually a spaceship and it was parked there by aliens and so on and so forth, which gives rise to the conspiracy theories about the reasons why the moon is 400 times closer to Earth than the sun and 400 times smaller, but that's why it can completely block out the moon during an eclipse, which I think we have one coming up soon, and various other different things like that. And then also why, for example, there's so many synchronicities with the radius and the diameter of the sun and the moon to things that we have here on Earth, or things that were written before people supposedly should have known things like that. Like, for example, there's something called spell 1080 in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and 1080 is the diameter of the moon in miles, which is 1,080 miles approximately, and how in some of the ancient Vedic texts, the yugas, which are years in the thousands, one of the yugas is 432,000 years, and one of them is 864,000 years, which are both the diameter and the radius of the sun, respectively. So there's some interesting things there. And also, a friend of mine, Ashley Needles, also wrote some romance novels that are, I believe, called Fallen Moon. I haven't read them in a few years, but they were actually pretty good. It was the first time I ever read any of those type of books before, that type of fiction, romance novel, which I very rarely read any fiction, but because she was a friend, I read it, and they were actually quite good. So let's see. And finally, the divination to take away from this here, the final note here, going along with the other things that we read here, it says, divination. Focus on opening yourself to greater power and reputation. Focus on opening yourself to greater power and reputation. And I'll do a recap at the end of all the different cards in sequence so that you can have a coherent list of exactly what all of the 6 cards have said, so you can see the pattern that has emerged here, which I find fascinating as well. Alright, so now we're going to go to card number 5, which I said is one that is very dear to me because I also used it in a music video that I created using Ariana Osborne's book some time ago. And it was for a song that I created with Flor Elizabeth Carrasco, and it was called Mathematical Ontology. You can find it on YouTube, I believe, under either my MC Narcissist account. But yeah, you can, if you look up Mathematical Ontology, you might find it. And let's see here. So the final one is Abraxas. Abraxas. And Abraxas is in the 5th position, which tells us, according to, and how I've been using this before for many years that I've had this book, it is where the situation is heading. Where the situation is heading. And Abraxas is fascinating, which is one of the reasons why I used it for Mathematical Ontology music video, as well as there are people who call themselves Pythagorean Illuminati, and also some of them specifically ontological mathematics or ontological mathematicians mention Abraxas a lot as well. And here's why. On the card for Abraxas, it says, Abraxas, also Abrasax, is an ancient god whose name gave us the mythical or mystical word abracadabra. The demonographers made him into a demon with the head of a king and snakes instead of feet. So that's Abraxas or Abrasax, which gives us abracadabra. And let's look at his annotations, inspiration, and the divination. He's actually the first one in the book because of alphabetical order. So, Abraxas. Annotation. In the Greco-Roman era, the name and image of a great god of the mind, Abraxas, was engraved on stones and amulets called Abrasax stones. The figure was drawn as a man with the head of a rooster and the legs of a dragon. Hold on, I got to read that first part again because I read it incorrectly. I read it Abraxas, but I want to make sure. It says, in the Greco-Roman era, the name and image of a great god of the mind, Abrasax, was engraved on stones and amulets called Abrasax stones. The figure was drawn as a man with the head of a rooster and the legs of a dragon, and in his hand he held a whip or flail. The Basilidians, a Gnostic sect, believed the mystical isosophy of his name, the sum of the value of the letters, is 365. So sum of the letters is 365, which is the number of heavens and days in a year, was proof of his power against confusion and misfortune. In Latin transliterations of some Greek texts, the placement of the sigma and the she in the word abrasax were switched to abraxas, and that is the name we use today. Over the centuries, some demonologists began to associate the incantation abracadabra with "my words, I will make this happen," with his name. Carl Jung, a man of science with an equal interest in the occult, wrote of the god, "Abraxas begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word and in the same act. Wherefore is Abraxas terrible." Alright, inspiration. When we hear the word abracadabra, some of us look for the magic, while others look for the sleight of hand. A talented stage magician tells an unbelievable truth with a lie of omission. You can believe that a rabbit is about to be pulled from a hat. The secret is that the hat is not an ordinary one. And finally, the divination, which is where the situation is heading or what you should look out for, simply says, "Beware of lies of omission and hidden truths." Beware of lies of omission and hidden truths. So there we have the first 5 cards reading, and now we'll go on to the last one, and then I'll read all of them together, only the divinations, so you can see if you find a pattern for yourself there, or see any pattern at all. Maybe it might not apply to you, but there definitely is a pattern, and you'll see that pattern once I read all of the divinations together at the end here. And so the 6th card, as Ariana Osborne describes it here, is supposed to be for the purpose of looking at help for outside source. Right? It says the last hidden card might be difficult to turn over. The first card is the querent, meaning the person asking the question, right, or the person looking for guidance. But the last card is someone else. Someone that you can ask to help you with this situation. And sometimes that asking someone else for assistance can be the hardest thing to do. However, if that 5th card really didn't look very good, isn't having an ally worth thinking about? If you're ready to ask someone to give you a hand, turn over the 6th card and it will lead you to that person. Also, you can also turn over the 6th card if you just want to see, even if you thought that the 5th card was agreeable. I often also just turn over the 6th just to see what it says, because even a little bit extra sometimes is worth taking a look at. So I'm going to turn over the 5th or the 6th card and see what it says. And it's Paimon, spelled Paimon. And Paimon, on the card it reads, Paimon, also Paimon, spelled Paymon, is a king of hell who manifests as a man with a female face, astride a camel. He commands 200 fallen angels, half previously of the heavenly order of powers. Okay. So that's Paimon, and let's look at the annotations, inspiration, and divination, and see what that says here finally before I get into the summary and just read all of the divinations of them to see if we to find a pattern there. But Paimon, annotation, which is an expansion of what's on the card. Paimon or Paimon is a king of hell in command of an ostentatious 200 legions, according to Wyer's Pseudomonarcha Daemonium. Yeah. So Paimon or Paimon is a king of hell in command of an ostentatious 200 legions, according to Wire Pseudomonarcha Daemonium. Unlike many of the hellish monarchy, Paimon's legions of supporters are not all lower-ranking demons. Half of those under his command are fallen angels that were of lower rank, but 100 of them were of the angelic host of powers. Paimon manifests as a man riding a camel, but, unlike many of the demons who manifest as soldiers or warriors, his face is very feminine in appearance. Inspiration. Paimon or Paimon's areas of expertise are many. He is knowledgeable in the arts and sciences, philosophy, and events of the past, present, and future. When Paimon is summoned, he is preceded first by a line of trumpeters to announce his appearance, followed by a line of those under his command, then a clang of cymbals and other musical instruments, and finally he will appear riding his camel very slowly into view. After that grand entrance, Paimon is very arrogant and loud, and it may take some time for the summoner to attract his undivided attention to pose questions or requests. However, Paimon is very knowledgeable, and it is perhaps understandable that he manifests in such an ostentatious manner out of missing the glory of his former heavenly incarnation. If you can bear with his admittedly long-winded and abrasive entrance, his gifts can be worth the time and effort. I find that to be very relevant right now for so many different reasons, specifically if you're actually listening to me. Divination. Beware of unfavorable first impressions. Dig that, folks. Many intelligent and knowledgeable individuals are awkward or abrasive at first as a defense mechanism. One should watch for those actions within oneself. Once again, the divination for Paimon or Paimon is beware of unfavorable first impressions. Many intelligent and knowledgeable individuals are awkward or abrasive at first as a defense mechanism. One should watch for those actions within oneself. Okay, so that was the sixth card here in that reading. Now, what I'm going to do is go through all of them in quick succession as a summary to see what kind of pattern emerges from this. So, what I'm going to do is also start with the first card that I pulled as a single card draw, which I said was to give kind of an overall feeling of what might come next with the 6-card draw, and it actually turned out to be rather surprisingly relevant in that sense. Okay, so I'm looking for my notebook because I'm going to write these down in a moment in succession here. So the first one that I did as a single card draw was Belphegor, right? If you remember, it was Belphegor. And Belphegor gave us the overall energy that we were going to pull from the rest of the 6-card pull here. And it's interesting that his divination is actually the longest one. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. I was looking at Behemoth. It's actually not the longest one. That was a mistake. I was looking at Behemoth or Behemoth. But this is Belphegor. And remember, it gave us the overall energy of the reading for these 6 cards here. So we're going to go in quicker succession so you can look at what pattern you may find. If you take notes, maybe you can see the pattern emerge here. So this is the single card before the other 6. There's a single card draw. Divination. Beware of inspiration that seems too good to be true, and ideas that seem like easy money with little work required. Again, beware of inspiration that seems to be too good to be true, and ideas that seem like easy money with little work required. Alright, moving on to Malcolm. Melchom. Malcolm. What does Malcolm tell us in his divination? It says, focus on budgeting and frugality. So that might be as an alternative to looking at easy money, right? And now Malcolm is the first out of a 6-card draw. And that follows over that overall energy of not being pulled into those quick money schemes, right? So the 6-card draw, the first one, Malcolm, which represents the querent, right? The person who's asking for guidance, says, focus on budgeting and frugality. The second card is Berit, which is the defense, or the thoughts and actions that will guard you in the situation of focusing on the gallery. And Barrett, the divination for Barrett simply reads, focus on material gain, but beware of greed that can turn to dangerous motivations. Third is the heart of the situation, represented by Nibis, Nybbas. And it's the heart of the situation, or what really you're looking for in life, which may not be all the stuff about money, but that might be just what you need to be focusing on those things that we talked about here, right? So here's the divination for Nibis. Focus for dreams, both inspiring visions and relaxing daydreams, and knowing the difference between the two. Focus for dreams, or focus on dreams. I think that would probably be better. It says focus for dreams in the book, but I think we said focus on dreams, both inspiring visions and relaxing daydreams, and knowing the difference between the two. Now we have the offense coming up, represented by Mikhail, or Mikhail, or Myceli, which is the offensive thoughts and actions that will affect people around you. And that says, focus on opening yourself to greater power and reputation. Focus on opening yourself to greater power and reputation. And then the fifth one, which is where the situation is heading, was represented by Abraxas, the inspiration for the word abracadabra, which simply says, beware of lies, of omission, and hidden truths. Beware of lies of omission and hidden truths. And then the sixth card of Paimon, Paimon, told us, which is the outside person to look for, simply says, beware of unfavorable first impressions. Many intelligent and knowledgeable individuals are awkward or abrasive at first as a defense mechanism. One should watch for those actions within oneself. All right, that's going to be it for now. I have some other ones I need to go to. That is the Forbidden Wisdom of the Infernal Dictionary. You've been listening to UniquilibriuM, presented by Hakeem Alibokas Alexander on Spreaker, Social Podcasting, and Wisdom, Social Audio Inc., presented for World Reading Club in association with UniquilibriuM. This edition's reading focus came to us from The Demon Tarot, The Forbidden Wisdom of the Infernal Dictionary by Ariana Osborne. This episode 49 on Spreaker was Demon Tarot by Ariana Osborne, Preface and card reading. So I read the Preface and did a little card reading there. Coming up next is going to be the Black Tarot, and then the Book of Runes.